Hello everyone, this is yet another episode of Career Talks, and today we have a special episode, and the episode is all about bloopers. Since we as career advisors and people who are actively involved in helping PhDs and other highly educated professionals in developing their careers, we also have our weekdays and we also make mistakes. And today is a comic relief. We will be talking about our own mistakes and everything that happened in our careers that we sometimes would like to forget about, but today, especially for you, we will confess all our mistakes. Maybe I can first ask our distinguished guests to briefly introduce themselves, as they have an impressive record as career advisors. So firstly, Vera, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Vera, and I am a medical writer, and I work in France right now. This is my first year after PhD academic and postdoc path. I have done 6 years of postdoc, and then this year I changed my career to becoming a medical writer. So last year was a huge year for me in terms of interviewing for jobs, and I think I can share a thing or two.
And maybe we should also mention that you're a dedicated YouTuber.
Yes, I also run a YouTube channel called PhD Coffee Time. Natalia will put a link below. And but today let's talk about career, which I don't think I talk a lot in my channel. So I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think you grew the whole generation of PhD students who are now thriving in their careers because of your channel. So I think this is too little to say. Thank you so much, Vera.
Thank
you
you
for accepting our invitation. And Vicky, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Vicky Sherwood, and I am a medical writer at Novartis, one of the largest pharma companies in the world. And I made a transition to the pharma industry roughly around just over 4 years ago. I was a career academic. I was in academia for 18 years before I decided to make the plunge and start a new career as a medical writer. And I write medical communications content for the pharma industry. And I'm also host of a blog, BiomedBadass, where we focus on career transitions into industry from academia specifically. So I've been writing that for the last 3 years or so now.
Yeah, great blog. I will link it below, so please check it out.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. I'm David Mendes. I have a PhD in cell biology. And since 2 years, I've been running, producing and hosting a podcast called the Papa PhD Podcast. And on that podcast, I'm kind of trying to prepare kind of deep and long form informational interviews with different people who did PhDs in different domains and ended up doing, having very different career journeys. That's how I see it mostly. So the idea is to, through the form of a podcast, inspire people who might be in their PhD and not yet have a network and not yet know what they can or want to do after their PhDs.
Okay, great. So today we have distinguished guests to chit chat about our own mistakes in the career path. Perhaps let's start with a little anecdote that I could tell you. So actually, I had a period of time after my PhD contract expired when I was interested in all types of jobs in industry, and I was actively applying for jobs. And I was at that point I was dogmatically following the rules of applying for jobs that I used to find online, and I was just reading, watching some materials on YouTube, trying to learn from the gurus, and I was somehow like I was often too dogmatic about my job search. And I remember the day when I came to the interview at IBM. So I passed the first round of interviews, and they offered me some entry-level position. And there was this, obligatory second interview to discuss a salary. And I decided to impress the recruiter, and I learned everything I possibly could about IBM. but I think I overdid. So I learned absolutely everything about the history of a company all the way back to the beginnings of 20th century. And I had quite a number of achievements. So they had like 4 Nobel Prize winners in the process, and they had all kinds of developments over the decades. And I memorized a book about IBM pretty much. So when we were when we were at the interview, I was just trying to impress the recruiter, and I was talking and talking and talking what I like about this company, and I was going through all my resources in my brain. And they were like, instead of getting happy, like the recruiter was looking more and more green on his face. And in the end, he just seemed extremely embarrassed. He seemed to be, he was like, oh my god, I know nothing about this place. And in the end, he offered me a position, but I felt that I overdid at that point, and too much is not a good idea. So you have to know the limits, whatever you do at the job interviews, even if it means preparing for an interview. Like, too much is too much is too much. So I remember I spent the whole week memorizing every single detail about IBM, and I still remember the impression I made. So that was my major blooper with applying for jobs. And I would like to hear your stories, guys. So is there anything in your like professional history, like that comes from your job interviews, that you remember as a major bummer?
I go first.
Go on
Since
then, Vera.
yes, I think after I heard Vicky talk, I think I will be ashamed to share mine. So let me go first.
You won't. I promise you won't.
So mine is pretty simple, but I was my first on-site interview because I had one call that I was almost getting this job, and that was during my unemployment after postdoc contract ended, and it was a pandemic. The first time I ever like get out of my home since the pandemic and travel on a train to go to a small city in France to get an interview. After the on-site interview and everything seems to went quite well, I went home and I realized I forgot to ask the email address of the people who have interviewed me. So at that point, when I was ready to write a thank you letter to, like I would always do after an interview, I always try to write a thank you note to just make sure I reiterate I am mutual. If you are interested, I'm mutually interested to join your company. Please hire me. I'm desperate to start. I didn't write that, but like that's usually my gesture. Then I realized I only have the email of the HR representative who didn't bother to forward my email. And I tried to write to her and say, could you please write this to send my thank you to this person who just interviewed me, the department head and everyone. And that was July, so everyone was on holiday in France, and there was no news after that. And I think I still, to this date, I still don't know if that was because I didn't write a good enough thank you notes that these people didn't go back and give me the news about, like, or maybe they've changed their mind or budget has changed. But it was quite a bummer that I make all the efforts to go to a site where my future colleagues would work, and I meet everyone, and I thought I would get the job already. And I didn't bother or didn't know to ask the question of how can I reach out to you after the interview by email, writing down the interviewer's email, because often you are contacted by HR representative who may or may not care about forwarding your thank you note. So to me, I think that was a very big mistake from my end, because it's more effective that you can, in 24 hours, it's like a date after you meet someone. 24 hours, you want to make sure you send a note saying, I really appreciate spending time with you, and let's keep in touch,
But that sounds like no.
Like,
If you
so,
say we should do it again, it means that they will never see you naked. That's what it means.
wait, should we cut this out? Anyway, but so that, to me, that was my blooper.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I understand. I mean, here in Europe, we don't have that like tradition of writing thank you notes also. I would
Okay.
imagine that if you did, even if your note didn't reach the target, I think it would not be elimination or disqualification. So perhaps you were just not good enough. So
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, it was quite, to me, I think is because I come from the US and I think this is the normal gesture. And I think I would feel better if I at least given and other notes to just to reiterate, I have been listening and I have understood what is from that meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a blooper, but can I just add to that? I think it's actually really important to send a thank you note, and I have always done it, not as an academic, but in my post-academic career, I have always done it. And even when they told me you're rejected or we're not interested, whatever, I have written in a note saying thank you very much for the opportunity, blah blah blah. And, you know, I hope you found the right candidate, or I'm glad for you that you've found the right candidate. And I think that always sends a message of, maybe in Europe where we're not used to doing it, right? But I think that always sends a message of, you know, you stand out, right? Because if you're prepared to do that, if you're prepared to say, I appreciate your time and I think you've done really well in finding the right candidate, it sets you apart. It like shows that you're very classy and you take rejection kind of on the chin. And that's part of like showing, you know, you can fit into a team and you can work in that sort of competitive environment. So I think that's well worth doing, even if there's not a culture of doing that in the country you come from. So I would reiterate, definitely try and find that email address, like Vera was saying, and definitely try and put that thank you in. And maybe in the US, people do that a lot, but I think in the UK, in Europe, we should be doing that more as well. My blooper. Okay, let's think about this. So I have a terrible one actually, but it was back in my academic days. And I don't know actually what I could have done about it. So I'd like your opinion on it. But basically, I turned up to this postdoc position. It was a position that I really wanted. It was at the University of Oxford. And it was a really, really interesting project. I won't go into the details of it because actually it was part funded by an industry. So it had some kind of patent protection potentially on it. But it was basically this exciting new innovative technology that they were trying to develop with multiple companies involved from multiple industries. So this thing had wide reaching potential. So I was like, wow, this is so exciting. I really want to work on this. And I got to the interview and I sat outside. And they were in an interview room where you could kind of hear what was going on. So they were interviewing multiple people on the same day. And the other candidate who was in the room in front of me, I could hear the conversation and they'd asked for a presentation. So we brought a presentation from our recent research work and she was presenting. And when she finished, I could hear them say to her, wow, you are the perfect candidate. You have all the skills we want. You have everything we need. You are just like, you know, we would offer you the job right now. And I'm sat there thinking, and there was a guy next to me, so he was interviewing as well, he could hear it. And we were both looking at each other like, well, what are we going to do, right? And I went into that presentation after she came out and I saw the candidate come out and I thought, you've got the job. But I knew they were still interviewing the two of us, right? I had to go ahead and do this presentation. So I loaded up the presentation and the expression on their faces couldn't be more explanatory of the fact that they were disinterested, right? They had already chosen their candidate and it was just like, quickly, you know, get your presentation done and move on. And I remember responding to that. And there was a panel of them, there was about 5 of them. I responded to that energy. I was just like, oh, I did this and this and this and this and this. And there you go, I've done it. And I didn't even fight at that point. I would just told myself it was over, right? But that was a really silly thing to do in hindsight, because actually, maybe they were saying that to everybody. I have no idea, right? I have no evidence for that. But I just completely fluffed the presentation because of what I'd heard outside the room before. And I think that is the wrong mindset, that I should have gone in thinking more positively and just given it a go, right? I had nothing to lose at that point, but I completely gave up. So that is my biggest blooper. And, you know, I threw that position away. And it was an awesome, awesome position. Although I have to say, I've been following the research since, and I've never seen anything come out on that, but maybe it's all top secret, I don't know. But, you know, it was a really exciting project. I was so gutted and disappointed. I remember going home at the time to my boyfriend, who is now my husband, and saying, it was just the worst interview I've ever done. It was absolutely horrendous. But what I should have done, you know, and I regretted this afterwards, I should have gone in fighting more and being really positive about what I was doing, because I had nothing to lose. So, yeah.
I'd like to chime in before Natalia's But I'd
Sure.
like to say one thing, like you are right that maybe they say this to everybody.
Mhm.
Like when I say thank you in my workplace, sometimes I say, hey, you are the best. And then I realized then my other colleagues who took my words seriously and they were like, how about us? Like if he's the best, who am I? Like I'm not the best. And then there is this joke about competing who is the best in my work in my office now, that who is the best today. I try to qualify that. But you know, I think that's you said it so right that this is usually ourself, our internal mindset is our biggest enemy, because when you
Mhm.
walk in that room thinking that you won't get chosen because they already made up their mind, then you're already like discounting your performance right at the spot. But one thing I've learned from being a postdoc back in US, I was lucky to be at the department at the point that they were hiring 3 faculty members. So I was seeing 15 people flown in on site and had job interview, and they were all phenomenal speakers. And it's funny to have seen the whole process, because you never know if actually the perfect candidate may not accept the offer.
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
so I think a lot of time after that experience, I have learned to be not to be arrogant, but at job interview, I stopped being nervous about like whether I'm judged, whether I can be better than the other candidate or not, because sometimes life happens, you know, if that person is better and they actually are available, but more desirable, they will be chosen. But in some cases, that person who is the perfect candidate has better job offer. Maybe she prefer to be in Harvard than in Oxford. You know, like you never know what is like what is on the other person's mind. So instead of having this guessing game and to think about, you know, will I get the chance because of this circumstance, I think just focusing on beating yourself as the enemy. I want to be better than yesterday. I want this talk to be the best one that I could have given, and not to take a chance of, you know, feeling discouraged by this. Yeah, but I think it's hard. It's like competing in Olympic Games, right? Like you, like 80% of that is your psychology, 20% is your physical ability. A lot of time people who have stronger mind, they in the end get the medal. It's not because they were training any less when people lose.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Vera. I mean, you know, I was like dismissing myself against the competition. And you're always in the competition, right? Whatever job you go for. And all you can do is your best, right? And I vowed to myself, that was a great learning curve, because I vowed to myself ever after that day, I was never going to do that again, right? So, and I have tried to live to that. And I think I've managed, because you know, I've been up against people with fantastic credentials, you know, been to the best universities and they're going for the best funding. And I've always tried to do my best. So it was a great learning opportunity, but still, it, you know, I still rue the day that I didn't get that goddamn project, because it was great.
Yeah.
Well, I think I really feel that it's a blooper, but it's blooper for them, not for you. Because at the end of the day, they allowed the situation when you were discouraged at the interview, and they in fact chose the first candidate that came, and it was just unprofessional that they let it happen, and it was not like a full-fledged interview in that sense. So I think it's not your blooper, to be honest. And I have to say, I know how it feels when you know that you're not preferred candidate. I had that situation too. And so at some point I was in a top 2 for a position that was for many reasons good for me, and I was determined to get it. But when I like came to this last round of the interview, when I knew that I only have like one person left next to me, I mean, I knew after 2 minutes that I was not a preferred candidate, because there was some wall between me and the committee, and I could feel that they just preferred the other candidate for whatsoever reasons, and that was like a sad feeling, because also of course the whole process required some energy from me, and I had to give a lecture in front of students, and yeah, there was such a barrier that at some point I also gave up. I was like, okay, they clearly don't want me here. They don't even ask interesting questions. They like, we are both resigned, sort of. So so it was obvious for me what the verdict would be, but I don't really see that how I could improve, because when I came, it was already like that feeling. And I don't think I fitted there also mentality wise. And I think that was maybe my mistake, that it was just not my tribe. It was not the type of people that I could easily communicate with. And that was just a strategic mistake, to think that if the project is interesting, it's enough to, and if I have credential, it's enough to get the job. Because at the end of the day, they have their own flock, and they examine if you fit them. Now I just don't apply for this type of jobs anymore.
I think it's a tough situation. It's hard not to get frustrated at the spot when you know you are not the preferred candidate. I do think, though, there are things you could take away if you encourage yourself, like if you have a stronger heart to say, like, this is okay, I'm not the most preferred candidate. But you can always take away the people you have met on LinkedIn, connect with them and stay in touch. If there are future opportunities, you may turns out to be the next most preferred candidate, and you will never know. So I think instead of overly emphasizing why I'm failing today, I think the narrative should change to going, today I met two incredible person who has willingly spent 1 hour with me at an interview. I would guess the hourly rate is 40 to 60 euro per hour, and I'm pocketing $100. Like, I think that's the mentality. If you just think, like, like if you are in real life, you might have been obligated to buy them lunch or dinner, like, but this in this sense, you're like learning from them. So I don't know, I'm strange. I think
but this gets to my point of that follow-up email as well,
Exactly.
right? That's important as well, because for the exact same reasons, right? They might take this preferred candidate on, and it might not work out for them and for the candidate, right? And that candidate might walk. And you sent that email and you've followed up and you've been very graceful about the rejection and everything, and you might have been the second best. And that's an open door then to invite you and ask, are you still interested? So it's always worth, I think, doing that follow-up. And like you said, having that mindset of, you've connected with decision makers, right? Keep that going in your network.
Because they're not only deciding one position, sometimes they have to spend money in the last day of the fiscal year. You never know. And then they were like, oh, this girl who sent me an email, let's interview her again. So and also you never know, the most preferred candidate may charge a lot of money. So they may end up thinking to hire you. I joke about this, but like, even you are hired, you never know why people hire you. Like I think is in my postdoc case, actually my postdoc in France, PI, she later on explained to me how she decided to hire me in such a quick timing in 1 week. Everyone would think I have the perfect CV, perfect interview performance, so that I get the job. But I think I prepared well for the CV, which I have uploaded my CV on a video and shared with the world how I drafted it. But I think the key point is her funding was going to the deadline expiry date, and she must spend it on someone who is international, and that were such a restrictions that I didn't know about, and I came across as a very strong candidate, so she was like happily making a decision at the spot. But the point is, you never know why someone got hired and why someone doesn't get hired, and it may not really represent how well of a person you are. It's just, I think it's just like what is the English, like destiny. Like sometimes you're destined to be in certain place, or you're destined to not be in certain tribes, like Natalia said. It's all happened. I would believe it's all happened for our growth and for the better.
Yeah, I can tell. And I think, like, I myself, I am a landlady, and I also have to make decisions like whom I want to live with under one roof. And sometimes it's like I cannot even tell. It's like a gut feeling that someone will be good to live with and or not. And I cannot tell people why they didn't get a room. It's really impossible, because it's just like a holistic feeling that you have a good feeling about this or not. And you just have to make a binary decision. And I think it's the same with hiring people. So I by the way, it's also, I had that blooper as well, that I felt overconfident, and I thought I was the preferred candidate, and maybe it was not true. So some time ago I was invited by a friend to apply for an interview for a place where I thought I would fit perfectly, and we also used to work together on some projects before. So I thought if she invited me, that meant she really saw me in that position, and she was actually the decisional person. So I came to the interview, and I was like feeling like on a picnic, and the questions were really easy, and I was just feeling I was having fun there. I was like, yeah, everything going smooth. I will get this job, and I didn't. So then I felt maybe I just felt overconfident, because the fact that the recruiter and you're invited doesn't mean that you are the preferred candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe they had to have some quota of people to hire to interview, or maybe I just could interview in the process. So I also had that mistake under my belt.
They might have a budget cut later on and decided they don't need the place. Like, yeah, I think you shouldn't judge yourself too harsh on that. But I think it's healthy not to have the mindset that I will be the best candidate and show up like that, because it doesn't, maybe it will come across as not as.
Have you never watched
prepared.
The Apprentice, Vera? Because they're all the best candidates, right?
I watched The Apprentice.
No, I have never watched The Apprentice, but I should. Maybe.
Okay. Well, they're all the best, right? They're all gonna get it.
Like my favorite song ever, Money, 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 Money.
I need to check it out.
It's perfect. It's just American culture, like, condensed.
I was
love
going to
it.
say that chemistry that we were talking about, and how they pick fitting on not just your technical skills, but how you actually fit into their culture and group and environment, is a huge part of the decision-making process. And I can say that from somebody who's been the interviewer and the interviewee. So I've made decisions on who to hire based purely on technical ability before, and made a huge mistake on hiring that person, rather than thinking about the fit within the team and the culture. And likewise, I try to keep that in mind when I go into interviews, knowing that a huge part of it is how I fit into this team. And yet I don't know the dynamics of that team yet. So, always tell yourself, if they choose you, you might be technically brilliant, you might be absolutely able, but they're making a decision on something that's very nuanced and that you might not have the full information about. So try not to take it personally, because a lot of it is about that click and connection, how they feel you're going to fit in the team.
Absolutely. Yeah, like a hiring manager is like a sentinel of a tribe, and they have to protect, first of all, think about their own employees. And you, before you get a contract, you're not theirs, right? You're not their tribe yet. So you're the outsider. So before they really shake hands on the contract, then they treat you as as a person from the outside. So yeah, I agree. It's absolutely. And now I know where I fit and where I don't, so I don't make these mistakes anymore. But actually, I would like to ask you a little bit more about the strategy in general. So your strategy in choosing positions or approaching the right people, and if you had any bloopers related to that. And I can actually start. I can say that one big mistake I made in the end of my PhD was that I was networking in the wrong way. So there are different types of networking, and you can build your network in depth or in like width, and these are the two different ways. So let's say when you build a business, it's good to have a lot of casual contacts, because that helps you to search for people, the right project. So if you are in a need to search for something, like hire an employee or find a collaborator, then having this distributed network that is quite shallow but very broad is actually beneficial. But when you are looking for jobs, it's better to have like depth in the network. So have at least a few people who are close to you, close enough to get out of their comfort zone for you. Because if you want someone else to recommend you for jobs, they are risking their own name for you. So they have to get out of their comfort zone to help you. And that was my mistake. I had a lot of casual contacts, people whom I met in the conferences, in the grad school, all kinds of travels, because I was traveling a lot in my 20s. So I felt comfortable about my network, because I was like, okay, I know pretty much thousands of people, so I will be fine, right? Whenever I want to find a job, I will just ask my contacts. But then I found myself unsupported, because none of these contacts really wanted to make step out of their comfort zone for me and ask in their network. So I felt like cheated on. I felt,
Mhm.
oh, I'm so alone with my job search. Like everyone is telling me, yeah, you're great, you have great credentials, but I don't have any doors. Like no doors are opening for me. So I felt that was just a strategic mistake I made. So wherever you go, you have to kind of know the rules in that environment and know what type of networking works best for your career opportunities. And sometimes, I also have former colleagues who literally had just one supervisor to collaborate with, and they had good contacts. They didn't have many collaborators. They didn't have many like friends around, but they had like good contact with just one person, and that person found them the next job and then the next job. So in academia, I think the depth of the network works much better. But how about you guys? Did you have any like situations when you felt like, oh, I made a strategic mistake here?
Yes. Can I go first, Vera? Sorry to interrupt, because I have a big, strong feeling about this, because, I have a career that was, embedded in academia, and I have a post-academic career, and I made a huge mistake inside academia. And I completely agree with what you say, Natalia, that depth of network is incredibly important, particularly, I think, inside academia, but also outside as well, I think, to some extent. So this is how I take it, because I used to think that networking was all about talking to the right people who could get you the right job, who would know where the openings were in the best faculties, with the access to the best funding bodies and all this kind of thing. And actually, what I think you've got to do is build up your network stepwise to that, right? You will reach those people eventually, but you've got to be very strategic about it. And I think you've got to approach the right people at the right time when you network. And this goes for academic career and a post-academic career, in my opinion. I think you've got to reach the right people at the right time. So I think you can go to people who are decision makers far too early without knowing basically what a role is about, and without sounding like you're a credible candidate for whatever job it is. And I think a lot of people enter networking or think about networking that they've got to talk to that decision maker who's going to get them a job. But actually what you've got to do is build up to that. So you've got to do the informational interviews, talk to the people doing the jobs, get the background information, get the research, and then talk to the decision makers with that credible candidacy conversation that you can have. Otherwise, you go to those decision makers and you absolutely blow that opportunity, right? To talk to them and to sound like somebody who could do that job or offer them something, right? Because you're too busy still trying to learn about that industry, or still trying to understand, where you fit in and what you can offer. So I think you've got to be very strategic about your networking, and I think you've got to build it up slowly. And it does take a little bit of time. So it's well worth investing, I think, early on, in whatever position you are, and building that up. But it doesn't take a lot of time day on day. You can do a lot in 5 minutes, right? You can link in with a lot of people. You can comment on a lot of posts. You can share posts. You can like posts. You can build that up. 5 minutes every day adds up a lot. But I think you've got to be very careful about reaching out to those really top tier decision makers, who are arguably the most, busy people in industry. They're hiring, they're making decisions, they're budget holders. And if you reach out to them too early, you can waste your opportunity. So I think you've got to really build up to that, would be my advice. And it's something I learned the hard way. And now I try to tell people not to make the same mistake.
Vicky has just talked about the blooper in terms of reaching too soon to the decision maker without the preparation. And I totally resonate with her, because you kind of like simple things like what is the address of the company site, like that's something you want to know before you talk to someone at a manager level and say, I can come and work every day and I estimate what is my travel hour. Like, I think those are the things you don't want to go on an informational interview with a hiring manager and ask, oh, by the way, what's the address, like, and you want to start with someone who is more at the basic level, that can be a day-to-day colleagues, and they will be friendly to give you all this answer and insight. So the second blooper, I think, is the basic question of whether or not this is your tribe. And I think that's back to Natalia's course and your book. And you've talked a lot about how we need to identify what type of service we want to be serving the world. And it's now my religion, I think. I resonate with it so much. I think every day I I feel really fulfilled as a writer because I think I am the type of person that get energy when I help people, and I feel very happy that other people's problem is solved. I don't get the same satisfaction when I think about myself being a professor, where I need to be the leaders and driving as the driving seats of the project. So I think that question has to be asked, and I think at the time I didn't know enough that I wouldn't be a good, in that sense, I wouldn't also be a good R&D scientist, because R&D scientists will also require people who can lead an independent research project. And from my experience, I network with these people on the phone, and they come across as people who will just be spending a long time in the lab, and they are not my tribe. So I think narrowing down, knowing what is your career goal and what are the type of people that you want to invest time and talk to. And the same as like the first time I've chat with Vicky, I met Vicky the first time because of informational interview, and I made it clear to her that my career goal is wanting to be a medical writer. And that's the only reason she responded to me at that time. When she said, because I'm only interested in helping people who know what they want. And I think that's very important mistake that I had in the beginning, that I didn't know what I want. And I reached out to MSL, I reached out to product manager, I reached out to people who have all kind of other jobs that I now in hindsight, I don't see myself being those career track. And sometimes it's important to widely talk to different people as well. But to avoid that, I recommend listening to Papa PhD podcast before actually giving the phone call and say, hey, can I talk to the phone for 2 hours and find out I'm not a good fit for being a R&D scientist.
Yeah, in my case, I didn't prepare for my career transition during my PhD. There was difficulties during. At the end was difficult, as it is with a lot of people. And basically, by the end, it was through networking that I got my few jobs, even from like friends of my partner, who's my first job was distance education tutor, and it was because someone's so my partner's friend's husband's mom was working in this school board that needed people kind of with my profile to give these courses. I did that for a few months, and eventually I found a job. And the next jump was through looking at what people who had been at the same institute that I had been, what they were doing, and especially if they didn't stay in academia. So it's a different type of networking. It was kind of looking at my organic network from the PhD and understanding where people were going. And I was kind of lucky that I didn't have to do a bunch of different interviews, but I actually have a recent job interview. It's not a blooper really, it's kind of a lessons learned type of thing. It wasn't so much networking, but it was related to applying for a position. And the idea is, sometimes when you read a job description, sometimes there's a red flag type of feeling that comes, and you might decide to ignore it. And this is what happened recently in my case. It was a position in a group here at the University in Montreal that I really like what they do. They work with students in a way that I find is really interesting, with graduate students. But the job description was so vast in its span that I said, okay, I might fit in this. So I ended up, applying and getting a first interview. And then at the first interview, just before the first interview, I learned that there's a test after the interview, like a 4-hour test. And so I was going in my head thinking that I could bring my communicator, my networking, etc. experience to this position, which had to do with communications within this organization. But in the end, once I heard about this test, there was a red flag. The very vague, or very vast job description was also kind of a red flag, because I wasn't sure how that I fit in all of the pieces, but I imagine they wanted to cast a wide net, and that's why they did that. But in the end, it turns out that they were looking for someone more of a technician profile, which wasn't a good fit for me. I wouldn't have felt in my place in that position. But this is fairly recent, and I'm not actively looking for jobs. It's just when you have this kind of almost dream organization that posts a job that kind of looks like you could be in there, then you apply. Anyway, it just happened, and the blooper side of it was this decision of kind of ignoring these red flags and maybe not asking questions that I might have asked before embarking into the whole adventure.
Do you know what Forrest effect means? Also known as Barnum effect. That's effect in psychology when you feel that the text relates to you personally. It's like the same effect that makes horoscopes successful.
Okay.
Maybe this is something that we also feel when we read job descriptions, that oh, this is me, oh, I'm perfect here, oh, I'm perfect there, but 95% of readers feel the same, so perhaps this is the case, I feel. So maybe now let's talk a little bit about job applications. Indeed, I can briefly mention that I think my biggest mistake was always to pack too much text into my applications, especially the motivational letters. And usually they say it's supposed to be one pager. So I was like, okay, it's one pager, but they don't say what type of font. So if I don't make it like 0.12, then I make 0.6, right?
Get the magnifying glass, yeah?
Yeah. So I was squishing like as much text as possible, and I think they were like they must have been like that they had twisted stomachs probably trying to read my motivational letters. But that was always my mistake, and ever since I started writing like shorter letters, they are much more successful. So that's just one thing I can mention. Vera?
So I think my biggest blooper was I didn't tailor enough to one target at a time. Like I think my success rate was really low in the beginning of my application. Especially when I tried to transition out of academia, I have this imagined view of how applying to job is like, and you just send magically many CV and many cover letter and sign it, like you go on to this company website and put in all this information and you will magically get an offer. But I make that mistake of applying to too many, too broad, and like I said, I apply to everything, like QA department, R&D department, product manager, MSL, and medical writer. And then I don't even have a strong sense of what are these application looking for. And I also have one-page resume, like it needs to be tailored to the job description. And it's a really important thing that you take the time to answer each of these lines and take it seriously. It takes a few months to get to that maturity level of Vera to like, okay, I need to sit down, look at this one piece of job description and really answer to that call. And I need to thank the recruiter who gave me this information, because he really wants his commission, and he said he sees something in me and he wants me to be successful. So at the time, actually, he told me, like, I can introduce you to my client, but I need you to change your resume. And I said, what's wrong with my resume? And he said, you need to make sure you read it carefully. Have you read the job description? And I've never been like spoken to like this, almost like he's criticizing a lot of how I make my resume. But I now thank him in hindsight, because this is the biggest lesson I've learned. And now I would take this like my religion. And anytime you want to apply to a new role, you make sure you read 5 to 10 lines of bullet point and make sure you address that in your resume. And if my YouTube channel is not relevant, I don't even put it there. Like it's, and I think at that time he suggested me to take away my YouTube channel. And I need to think of it as, as a suggestion and I need to keep an open mind to just, nobody actually care about it in the context of a job application. So that's why, yeah, so that was the blooper I would think is I didn't tailor enough and didn't pay enough special detailed attention to each job.
Well, I might actually add from my side that I also, maybe we can briefly talk about salary negotiations as well, because I think one mistake I was making, and with the job application process in general, and especially in salary negotiations, that I often couldn't see the difference between the beginnings, like the early stages of the process, and the late stages. Because in fact, especially if you apply for like corporations or some other large organizations, they have their procedures and they have multiple stages of recruitment process. And in the early stage is just elimination stage. So the recruiter's role is to eliminate everyone who doesn't fit the profile. So you have to make sure that you're as close to what they're looking for as possible. And when you're asked about salary expectations, you have to give a broad range so that you make sure that you overlap with what they have in mind, which they don't say. But when it comes to the late stages, and when you meet with the hiring manager who actually knows the team and who is looking for the team member, and they might be your boss at some point as well, then you have to make sure that you can show how much extra value you can provide to the team. So you have to kind of play completely new persons compared to how you were behaving and introducing yourself before in the early stages. Now you have to show that you're so much more than what they actually ask for. And when you are asked about salary expectations, now you can say the truth, sort of. You can say how much you really expect, because you already know that they have strong interest in you. So you can now actually start negotiating. But once you're early in the process, this is not a good idea. It's better to just spread the range so that you make sure that you kind of fall into the range that they prepared for. So I didn't really see the difference, and I think I lost quite a few options because of that, because I was just giving, like, I was saying the truth. I was saying how much I would really wish to earn, instead of just giving a broad range and just sleep through until the day comes when I can actually say how things are. So that was my big mistake, I think. So did you guys also have some like some events that you could consider mistakes in your in your salary negotiations?
I can say that my first salary negotiation after the PhD, I jumped into it blind. I probably looked at Glassdoor. I don't even remember if Glassdoor was available at the time, but I didn't. One thing I should have done was talk with people around me who either hire or have gone through the process more, and ask them, okay, how do I deal with this story of when they ask me for the number, because I had no clue. So I think I remember not being very satisfied out of the outcome and of the conversation itself. So I do think it's something you should prepare, talk with people who are actively interviewing and who've done it a few times. But also, if you have in your network, Vicky was talking about the importance of slowly growing a network. Well, if you're able to grow a network in the domain that you want to work in, try to talk about it with these people. Maybe they're not in the exact organization you're applying for, but there's kind of a ballpark in the same industry that you can learn by talking with people, for sure. And I think the thing is, don't go blind, don't go unprepared for that conversation, because especially for me, it was kind of an awkward, unusual conversation coming from the PhD, from so many years of not thinking of money or salary in those terms. It was a totally different space. It was awkward for me, and I felt uneasy, and I think it kind of gave a vibe to the conversation. I did get the job, but I wasn't satisfied out of that first negotiation that I had. So do prepare, and talking with people is one of the best ways. You can also see numbers by going to Glassdoor and things like that. But if you talk with people, I think you can get an extra inkling on how to approach it.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, what is your salary expectations is one of these standard questions. And I also and that you will always get at the interview. And that was also my mistake, that at some point I was not very well prepared for these standard questions, like how do you see yourself in 5 years from now, or yeah, things like that. And salary expectations are one of these like standard questions. So it was like every single time I was going to the interview, and it was like, no one expected the Spanish Inquisition, right? I was like, damn, I should have prepared for this one, and then again, and then again. And
I have a great tip for salary negotiations, and I've learned this sequentially over the years, and it is always try and negotiate them once the offer's on the table, because I think a lot of companies try and have this upfront, and almost like they might use it like a decision-making tool, which, is frightening, right? When you're actually, a candidate going through the interview process and you don't want to have to give a figure. So try not to disclose it. And the way to try not to disclose it is by saying up front, unless I see the offer, I cannot give you a figure, right? Unless I know everything that's on the table, right? Everything that you're offering, the full package, I cannot give a figure. And I use that all the time now, because they try it on quite early on in the process. And once you've said a figure as well, you're stuck with that figure, right? You might go away later and do your research and find out you're $5,000 or maybe even more out of scope of where you should be. And then it's too late because you've said the figure. So I think always try and push it back to the last moment possible, and use that little, unless you give me the offer with the full package and all the, trimmings and everything you're going to offer, I can't disclose.
You can pair it with Natalia's first suggestion, which was to give a very wide range. If they really ask you, give like from something that's really, really inclusive. But I really, really love it, and it's a strong statement also. It's like, yeah, as a candidate, I can't really go into this conversation without having this data. I love it. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it gets you out of jail quick, because they're not going to come to an offer early on, right?
And actually, I can say as a mathematician that, from game theory perspective, the side that gives numbers first usually loses the negotiations. That's also then mathematically, you should try to pull the numbers from the other side first. And yeah, as you're saying, like if this is not possible, then try to postpone the conversation for as much as you can, so that they can see your value first, and get kind of attached to you once you talk, and only then give the numbers. So absolutely. So I fully agree with that. Since we have to slowly come to the end, because we already have a lot of material, are there any other situations that you would like to mention, or perhaps some general piece of advice that you would like to give to our viewers?
I think there's something I'd like to add, and Vera was talking about the resume and tailoring it, and one thing that I've done, and it's funny because I didn't get this position recently that I was talking about, but I did really enjoy, for the first time ever, the process of preparing, because after these years of Papa PhD, of being on LinkedIn quite actively, of talking with people who are kind of almost specialists in helping people get interviews at least. And I got inspired by Carrie Twigg. She actually just published a book, which is actually pretty cool, which allows you to kind of follow her system. She calls it Career Stories. When I looked at my resume, the one I was using before, that whenever I did apply for positions, and looking at tailoring it in that way of kind of telling a story that was really tailored to the organization that I was going to, I think it's a huge blooper that, I can consider it a blooper, throughout time in the past of using as a resume that was it was just a kind of a shortened CV in a way. There was a lot of items and bullet points, but there was no story. Like I said, I didn't get the position, and I think it was a good thing because I wouldn't be a good fit. But I really enjoyed the process, and I really, really can recommend thinking and tailoring your resume and even your cover letter if need be thinking of what you did in the past for organizations, the objectives you reached, how you contributed, and not so much about the items of what you did. It gave me a chance to do this introspection through my whole professional past that I hadn't done ever, because the idea is to really think of the whole story and then think of moments, think of wins, think of losses, and kind of build the story, and then think of how you can bring that, how you can leverage that in a way that's going to speak to the person who's going to read your resume. So yeah, don't just shorten your academic CV to make a resume. It's not going to work well for you, in my opinion.
I love Kerry Twigg as well. I follow her because, you know, I think this whole idea of telling a story, it's how people remember things, right? It's in our psychology. It's embedded. It's how you get remembered, right? If you tell a great story, people remember you. So she's on the nail there. I'm going to have to get a new book. I didn't realize she published a book.
Yes,
I follow her on LinkedIn. But
it's fairly recent. It's this year. It's from this year. She was on the podcast, but at the time she was still working on it. In the meantime, she did publish.
I'm going to have to get that. No, and a new resume for me for 2022 then.
Oh, you'll see, you'll enjoy the experience of going back and getting all the post-its out, and it's a lot of fun. At least for me, it was a lot of fun.
Vicky, do you also have some final words to share?
Can we go back to the networking point? Because I think it's something you raised, David, about talking about when you reached out to people and you reached out to your alumni. And I think that is an incredibly important thing, particularly for transitioning academics, because we talk a lot about going and getting those informational interviews and talking to people who are doing the jobs. And sometimes, you know, when you're reaching out to people cold, it's very difficult to get them to respond to you sometimes. And we all hear these things where people say, I'm just not getting anyone, you know, willing to give me that informational interview. I think if you leverage your alumni, and you can actually use that tool on LinkedIn, right? You can find people through your alumni, through your college and your school that you went to, through LinkedIn. If you find them and talk to them directly, you've got an automatic indoor, right? You say, we went to the same college, we studied the same thing, whatever it is, through that alumni link. And automatically, you know, if you see they work for Amazon or Google or whatever, hopefully, I think your chances of talking to them is much higher. And I think we underestimate that, and especially as transitioning academics, you know, we've all studied at lots of different places, we've been in lots of different departments, we should be leveraging that, and I think that's an incredibly important thing that is not getting across, I think, to the academic community, how you can leverage that alumni link, and you can use LinkedIn to help you do that. It's great.
Yeah, it's a built-in organic tribe that you have already.
You already share something, right?
And people often, even if they're much later in their career, they'll be like almost touched that, oh, someone from my alma mater is coming and asking me. You know, it's a great resource, and it's true that often you might forget that it exists.
Yeah, I think it's underutilized. So definitely, that would be my takeaway.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, for sharing. And I think we have to come up to the end of this episode, unfortunately.
Thank you for having me, Natalia. And nice to chat with David and Vicky today. And everyone, please subscribe to Natalia's YouTube channel.
Thanks so much, Natalia, for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this. It's been an exciting conversation. And you know, please have a look at my blog. If you're interested in a transition into industry, the BiomedBadass blog, I've got lots of information there covering all aspects of that career transition. So do take a look and follow Natalia's channel. This is a great channel for lots and lots of information.
Natalia, thanks also for having invited me to this blooper discussion. I think it's a great, fun way to talk about very, very important things. I'm really admirative of all the work you're putting forward with your even with your Odyssey test that you've put out, the book that came out also not so long ago. So I'm super honored to be here. And also, if you want to listen to bilingual French and English interviews of people who have done different things after their PhD and talk about their life balance, their industry, mental health sometimes, but also about what they do you can follow Papa PhD. It's at Papa PhD Podcast in the social media, and it's on all podcast platforms. So I'll be glad to have you as my listener, but also listen and follow Natalia, because she's always putting out great stuff.
Thank you so much, David. Okay, so thank you everyone who reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please comment below, and we will answer all your questions. And of course, I hope to see you next time. So take care. Have a great day.